Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. I have been called out for my no mask stance. So in this segment, I want to make my full anti-mask case. Let's begin the presentation. Oh, it's very nice, beautiful. Let me start off with who should wear masks and when and what kind. Here's the deal. If you are sick and you are symptomatic, which means you're coughing and hacking all over the place, you should stay home. But if you must go somewhere, then you should wear a tightly fitting N95 mask. That's the conditions. You're sick, symptomatic, you have to go somewhere, you slap one of those puppies on. Everywhere else, anywhere else, anyone else, there's no need to wear one ever. I'm talking about surgical masks. I'm talking about those blue masks. I'm talking about the cloth masks, etc. All right, Slater, what's your evidence? Let's begin with an appeal to authority. This is Michael Osterholm. He's the head epidemiologist at the University of Minnesota. This is the guy who made all the models that said millions of people are going to die. He was on Joe Rogan's show on March 10th, 2020. This is when I first began to freak out about COVID, saying everyone's going to die. He is now on Biden's task force, one of the top guys on Biden's task force, not Trump's task force, Biden's task force. Far left guy, here he is on CNN last week.
We know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not very effective in reducing any of the virus movement in or out. Either you're breathing out or you're breathing in. And in fact, if you're in the upper Midwest right now, anybody who's wearing their face cloth covering can tell you they can smell all the smoke that we're still getting. We need to talk about better masking. We need to talk about N95 respirators, which would do a lot for both people who are not yet vaccinated or not previously infected, protecting them, as well as keeping others who might become infected, having been vaccinated, from breathing out the virus.
Okay, so he's talking about N95 at the end, but in the beginning he's talking about your basic regular surgical cloth mask and how they don't do anything. That's not a right-winger there. He's on Biden's task force, all right? The journal article that we've quoted a lot, it's the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine, 3 Oxford researchers. The National Health Service, the government medicine over there, they needed to make some cuts. They were running out of money. So these researchers said, well, I don't know, what about these surgical masks? Do they even do anything? Do we need to be spending $10 million a year on surgical masks? Do they work? And they ran a bunch of studies, and they looked back on a bunch of studies, and they concluded, no, they don't. They don't do it. They don't stop bacteria particles, they don't stop virus particles. And they concluded that in every study we looked at, there's no statistical evidence that the patient, who the surgeon is performing surgery on, that the patient had more or less infection. And there was no evidence that the masks protected the surgeon from splatter from the patient either. Here's a quote from the study. There are studies to suggest that masks fail to protect surgeons from potentially hazardous submicrometer contaminants. This corresponds roughly to the size range of infectious bacteria, while viruses are even smaller. Now, I've been sharing this lately, and people say, oh, Slater, so you found one study. Big deal. Well, this study actually reviews many studies. There's more. I can't go over every single study in a 2-minute Facebook video, so I'll go over a couple right here. This is from 1992. Surgical masks may not be sufficient to remove the submicrometer size aerosols containing pathogens to which these healthcare workers are potentially exposed. Now, this is an argument people say this, like, wait, Slater, we're not blocking the virus particles, we're blocking the aerosols that the virus particles are inside of. No, you're not. That's that study from 1992. Here's another one from 2005. Some surgical masks may let a significant fraction of airborne viruses penetrate through their filters, providing very low protection against aerosolized infectious agents in the size range of 10 to 80 nanometers. And the fraction they were talking about was 85%. 85% penetrate through the mask. So you're saying, oh, but Slater, I've seen all these studies that say masks work. First of all, have you, or have you just seen cartoon graphics from CNN about how they work? But even if you have seen a study about how they work, surely they're talking about N95 masks, which is my point. If you're sick and cough it up everywhere, then you should wear an effective mask, and that's an N95 mask. Surgical masks are nothing. So stop strapping them on my kids. Stop making me wear them everywhere I go. So there's that. Let's move on to common sense. There's an engineer who was quoted in the Telegraph in England recently, and he said doctors and researchers, they're great at what they do, right? But they're terrible at understanding microscopic size proportions. And we all are, right? Humans are very bad at risk assessment, and humans are very bad at understanding really big things and really small things. Like if I tell you to imagine a trillion, whatever, balls, or a trillion chickens, right? You can't, like a trillion, we can't, too big. And if I tell you to visualize a nanometer, it's too small, you can't. Our brains can't comprehend it. And this guy's an engineer and he deals with really, really small things. And he says the gaps in the fabric of a cloth mask is 500,000 times bigger than a virus particle. And a surgical mask gap, the fabric is 100,000 times bigger than virus particles. That's the difference between you and 6 Empire State Buildings. So if you were a virus particle, there's the Empire State Building, 6 of those piled on top of each other. If you were a virus particle, you're 6 feet tall. Is it possible for you, the virus particle, to pass through a space that is the size of 6 Empire State Buildings? Yes, I believe it is. I believe you could make it through that gap in the fabric. And again, Slater, it's about the aerosols. No, doesn't even cover that. Not to mention, I'm not sick and I'm not coughing up droplets of water all day long. You know what I mean? I'm not walking around like succotash, spitting all over the place when I go to the grocery store. So what are we even protecting if I'm not sick? And I'll say it again, if you're sick and you're symptomatic and you're coughing and hacking and you have to go somewhere, you wear an N95. That's the mask nuance here. Not strap everyone in anything, kids, wherever they go all day long. That's not appropriate. It's not science. Here's a Stanford doctor. He said, he was at a Ron DeSantis roundtable. He said, there's only been one randomized study of masks on COVID in Denmark, and it found essentially no statistically significant benefit to the mask wearer from wearing a mask. I'm not aware of any other randomized evaluation of the mask, even though it's been 18 months since we've been living with COVID. Same thing, Slater, you found one doctor who says they're useless. No, there's plenty. I could quote many of them here, but the majority of them are scared to say anything at all. Because if they do, they'll be destroyed as a MAGA, Trump-supporting murderer of grandma. Look what happened to the former head of the CDC, who said he was sidelined and canceled for merely suggesting that maybe COVID leaked from the Wuhan lab. Doctors are afraid they will be destroyed if they come out against this religious cult garment that we call a mask. As soon as a doctor comes out, they will be ridiculed, mocked, and destroyed, and potentially even fired, removed from their job for saying that masks don't do anything. Some are brave enough to come out. Many more aren't yet. Actually, that first study that we shared, the Journal of the Royal Medicine, they did a survey on surgeons. And I think it was 30% of them. They asked, why do you wear a mask? And 30% of them were like, just because we always do. Like, will they do anything? No, we know they don't do anything. Now, you don't have to trust them. You don't trust the doctors. Just look at the numbers yourself. You look at any map of cases and hospitalizations, and it goes up and down and up and down. And then you pinpoint where the mask mandate went into effect, and it makes no difference. It makes no difference. Here's Hawaii, and we can do this with any state, any region, any country. Right? There's the number of cases, and it goes up and down. That first one is the first line is the mask mandate, and then that second line is another mask mandate. And it doesn't, and Hawaii has major mask compliance. It's 98% mask compliance. And it still goes up. It's up, down. You could point to anywhere on the map and be like, mask mandate. Where it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference at all. Now, the classic response to that is, if they didn't have a mask mandate, then it would be way worse. That's not science. You can't make up. That's not a real argument. In Europe, they're doing some crazy things in Europe, but even they're not crazy enough to mandate kids wear masks to school. This is the Fauci of England.
School children have the lower amount of infection, especially primary school children. And in looking at it, we've talked to educationalists, public health and clinical specialists. And the consensus view is very strongly to not advise school children at primary school age to wear face coverings. This for two reasons. One is that they can have difficulties wearing them and keeping them on all day. And the second part of that is that it's really important that they can see facial expressions in order to develop their communications and language skills. Schools have delivered a lot of measures to reduce the risk in schools, and additional plans to test families of primary school children will also be in place as schools go back. And therefore, the strong recommendation is for primary school children not to wear masks.
As crazy as England is and has been throughout all of this, even they're not crazy enough to strap masks on kids all day long. And she did a very appropriate cost-benefit analysis on are masks appropriate? And they said no, strongly came to the conclusion that the answer is no. And did you see the podium that she was standing behind? The podium with the caution tape that says, stay home, save lives. Oh, and we strongly say that kids should not wear masks. Isn't that amazing? All right, now here's the classic study that I bring up all the time, or article I should say. 5 Harvard public health experts. This is May 2020. The question was, should hospitals require masks throughout the entire hospital or just in the COVID wing? This was the question. Should we require masks, like everyone wear a mask in the whole hospital? And here's what they said. We know that wearing a mask outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. That's so good. It was an aside. That was the first sentence of the second paragraph. They're like, oh, like, obviously, like outside of healthcare settings, you don't need to wear one, right? Later on, they say, again about hospitals, like, well, should we require everyone in the hospital to wear it? They go, I don't know. They ultimately conclude yes, but they say masks serve symbolic roles. Masks are not only tools, they're also talismans, like a good luck charm, like a rabbit's foot, that may help increase healthcare workers' perceived sense of safety, well-being, and trust in their hospitals. Although such restrictions may not be strictly logical, we're all subject to fear and anxiety, especially during times of crisis. So put your mask on because you're anxious. That's not good enough for me. Not anymore. And not on our kids. 2011, England had, and we have a version of this in America too, but England had a influenza pandemic preparedness strategy. And it's like 50 pages, and it's what's our plan? If there's a pandemic, what's our plan? So they have a whole section in there about masks. Here's what they said. Although there is a perception that the wearing of face masks by the public may be beneficial, there's in fact very little evidence of widespread benefit from their use in this setting. They say the government has already in place stockpiles of face masks and respirators for health and social workers. And in line with the scientific evidence, the government will not stockpile face masks for general use in the community. It has been scientific consensus, it's been policy consensus, it's been medical consensus for decades that masks are not necessary for people in normal life, even under pandemic situations. That has been the consensus. I would argue it still is the majority view. But for whatever reason, during COVID, it's you got to wear it all the time, nonstop, everywhere you go. No, enough of that. Stop. So that's my scientific argument as to why surgical masks are ineffective in stopping COVID, and you should not be mandated to wear one. If you want to wear one, and what, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Just keep it off me, and especially keep it off my kids. The CDC last year, I'm quoting from their website, they released a study, the physiological burden of prolonged PPE. This is the CDC website, of prolonged PPE, personal protection equipment use on healthcare workers during long shifts. This was a study they did on N95 masks, people who wear N95 masks for over an hour. And they concluded, oh, it's awful. Low CO2 levels, terrible for your health, dizzy, you can't think straight, it's dangerous, definitely do not require workers to wear it for longer than an hour, they need to take many breaks, et cetera, et cetera. That was last year. Now, the CDC says we got to put our kids in these masks for over 6 hours a day. And if little Timmy takes it off for 1 second, oh, put it back on, put it back on. And this says nothing. I'm not saying anything even about our politicians. Goodness, I'm not even going to waste our time with that. There's many of these, but this is one of the spokespeople at the Department of Justice, right? Showing you what he really thinks about masks. It's off. Once he's off camera, it's off. He walks across the stage, throws it on, and then takes it right off, okay? It's all for show. So many examples of reporters at White House briefings and Chicago mayor's briefings and all across the country. The reporters, they wear their masks for the cameras. They think the cameras turn off, except there's one more in the back that's still on. They take all their masks off. It's totally for show. AOC, just like last week, she was on the steps of the Capitol, yucking it up with people, no mask. Hey, everyone, let's take a picture. Puts her mask on, picture's over, takes it back off. All right, so there you go. 15 minutes. That's my presentation. I look forward to your rebuttal. All of these studies, all of the videos, everything I just presented to you right now is linked on our website, mikeslater.locals.com. Please go there, use whatever you'd like, spread it, share it, do whatever you must. And do not put your mask on ever again, and never, never mask your kids. Hey, I want to tell you about our app. You know, we talk about the smartphone version of our app all the time. We also, it's for any device. I got it on the TV right here as well. Everything is there. It's the smoothest, cleanest interface. This is what I talk about with the interface. You got everything right there. New episodes, Bill O'Reilly, Dana, Buck, Jesse, me, all right there. Couldn't be easier. One click, boom, it plays. Totally free download in the App Store. iPhone, iPad, TV, free. The first TV. Spread the word. Hello, Slater Crusaders. The name of the show is True Story. So we always look for the true story. Now, how do we find the true story? Well, one good place to start is God's Word. Proverbs 18 says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. And in a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right, until someone comes forward and cross-examines. A lot of problems in our country would go away if we just waited a minute and waited for the true story. I got a silly example first, and then I have a much more serious example that I want to share in this segment. And just add it to the pile of lies that we're told. It's lies and just not waiting, not caring for the full story and the true story, and just sharing it too quickly without, right? And they're all in the same big pile here, right? Jussie Smollett, the Covington Catholic kids with the Native American elder. I don't know, maybe the entirety of the Trump presidency. Charlottesville hoax, Black Lives Matter peaceful protests, lab leak, masks, on and on and on and on. All right, here's the silly example first. So this guy goes to a Colorado Rockies baseball game. He's got sweet seats. I've never sat behind home plate before, right? It's the ninth inning. A black player goes to the batter's box, and this guy behind home plate yells out the N-word. Are you kidding me? Here's the video of it.
Okay. 3 yesterday. Here's the 1-0. And again, it's 2-0. And this is not to pick on Ben for hits today. 3 yesterday. Here's the 1-0. And again, it's 2-0. And this is not to pick on for hits today. 3 yesterday. Here's the 1-0.
Ooh. Check this out. The Rockies immediately put out a statement condemning this vile racist. They're disgusted at the racial slur. They don't stand for it. Zero tolerance. They're investigating. Oh, just terrible. Wow. To think we still live in a country where someone would do that. It took about a day for everyone to realize that he obviously wasn't yelling the N-word, because that is ridiculous and would never happen. So what's he doing? He's calling out. Do you notice he's reaching, he's doing this. The player's right here, and he's doing this. He's going like this. What is he doing? He's calling out to the Rockies mascot. Do you know the name of the Rockies mascot? I did not know until today. The Rockies mascot name is Dinger. Surely his name will now be changed. Whoops. He was yelling, Dinger! Hey, Dinger! And if you watch the video, he's doing this. He's like waving, and you can see it. You can see Dinger. He's a couple rows over, right? A couple sections over. He's yelling, right? So a little oopsie daisy there, but not after the Major League Baseball commissioner and everyone else beclowned themselves with this whole, what a terrible reminder of the lack of progress we've made in our society. That abhorrent racial animus that this man showed is far too commonplace, blah, 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 blah. And it never happened. All right, so that's the goofy story. But you see how that works? Luckily, they found out the truth before they dragged this guy through the mud and destroyed his life. Truly, if it took another day for the truth to come out, that guy would have been doxxed and he would have been fired from his job and would have had these apologies. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, that's the silly one. Here's the serious one. Does the name Amy Cooper ring a bell? Amy Cooper is the Central Park Karen. There she is. Does that ring a bell? So here's the deal. She's in Central Park with her dog, white woman. A black man, bird watcher, walks by, tells the woman she needs to put her dog on a leash. She flips out, calls police on him. Why? Because he's a black man. And that's America today. The black guy records her calling 911 and then puts it on the internet. Here's the video.
Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking pictures and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in a ramble, and there is a man, African-American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African-American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. He posted that video. Now, unfortunately for Amy Cooper, that happened the same day as George Floyd. So the media put the two together. And they said, well, George Floyd, here's the blatant example of racism in America. But this is also the Karen in Central Park, the more subtle racism that black people experience every day, where you just have an innocent bird watcher, just an innocent black man walking through the park, minding his own business, and this white woman called the cops on him. That's the story. She was fired from her job, whole thing. Barry Weiss did some more investigating. I am extremely impressed with Barry Weiss. She went out on her own and she started her own Substack, and she does fantastic work. I did not know that Barry Weiss used to be a member of Westboro Baptist Church. That's that super hate-filled cult that protests funerals and stuff like that, right? She used to be a member. And I think like her grandfather like founded or something. Like she's like was like in it. So she grew up a life where everything was evil and narratives were very black and white. So because of that, she now questions all the narratives that are a little too neat. You with me? She questions all the narratives that are just too convenient, too tidy, too simple, too black and white. She has a radar for that, where most people don't. Most people go along with it, and they just eat what they're fed. She always questions it. And good for her. This is what she said. She said, when I encounter viral moments like the one involving this, the angel and the villain so neatly laid out, each person frozen in roles in a grand ideological narrative, my first instinct is to ask, what context am I missing here? Wonderful question. What context am I missing? So a couple things of this story that I want to share here, and then we'll talk about why this matters. First, this is what the black man, the bird watcher, posted on his Facebook. Here's his description of the events that transpired right before he took the video. This is what he wrote, okay? Not some other bias, not her, not some other bias. This is what he admits to. Here's the conversation. Me, ma'am, dogs in the Ramble Park have to be in the leash at all times. The sign's right there. Her, the dog runs are closed. He needs his exercise. Me, all you have to do is take him to the other side of the drive outside the Ramble and you can let him run off the leash all you want. Her, it's too dangerous. Me, look, if you're going to do what you want, I'm going to do what I want, but you're not going to like it. What's that? Me to the dog, come here, puppy. He won't come to you. Oh, we'll see about that. I pull out the dog treats I carry for just such intransigence. I didn't even get a chance to toss any treats to the pooch before Karen scrambled to grab the dog. Don't you touch my dog, she says. That's when I started video recording with my phone and when her inner Karen fully emerged and took a dark turn. You kidding me? He threatened her. The video kicks off with her saying, "You're threatening me." And most people just assumed, oh, it was just his presence as a black man. No, he threatened her. I'm going to do what I want and you're not going to like it. No news story mentioned this. Not a single story mentioned what he said to her before the video started. 2 articles reference it in passing. The Washington Post said that the bird watcher asked her to leash her dog and then left out the threat, left out what he actually said. And then the New York Times had a 2,500 word essay where they summarized that conversation as they exchanged words. He quoted it on his Facebook page, they exchanged words. This is from a lawsuit between her and her employer. We fired her over this. One of the testimonies was from a black guy, Jerome Lockett, who goes to that park and said that that birdwatcher guy has aggressively shouted and threatened him as well. Here's what he said. He said, when I saw that video, again, black man, when I saw that video, I thought, oh, geez, I cannot imagine if he approached her the same way how he has approached me, how she may have genuinely been afraid for her life. If I wasn't who I was, I would have called the police on that guy too. He goes on and says, 2 fellow dog owners have had similar situations with this man, but don't feel comfortable coming forward because they're white. So it's the black guy who's the Karen. There's video of that birdwatcher guy at some park committee Zoom meeting complaining about unleashed dogs in the park. And he carries around dog treats right for this very reason, right? That's the Karen. That black guy's the Karen. Last point, I gotta go. You see the video from his perspective, and she's shouting in the phone, getting louder and louder, more hysterical, crazier. It takes a dark turn. And you wonder, and you're like, wow, the lady's psycho, right? I never even thought to listen to the actual 911 recording, right? I saw her yelling in the phone. That's all I need to hear. No, listen to the actual 911 call.
New York City 911, do you need police, fire, and medical? I'm sorry, your phone is breaking up really bad. I can't hear anything you're saying.
myself and my dog.
Ma'am, I cannot hear anything. The phone is breaking up really bad.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm going to crash my bed.
Okay, but what is your location?
That's why she's getting more frantic and crazy, because the 911 person can't hear her. Remember, this man just came up to her and said, "You're not going to like what I do next." So why does this story matter? In short, when villains and heroes are nicely laid out for you, you're probably being manipulated. And we give examples of this every day. Just a real quick one. We're told that evangelical Trump supporters are the ones who are not getting vaccinated. The truth is, it's black people and atheists. There's a mix of everyone who's not getting vaccinated. But the neat and tidy idea that it's white evangelicals who aren't getting vaccinated, it's not true. Question all the simple narratives. And just like that Rockies story, use your common sense. The guy clearly didn't yell the N-word at a baseball game. A lot of people. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Looks like a lot of fun. Barack Obama's 60th birthday party on Martha's Vineyard. The scaled back version, of course. These are from the same people who canceled your jobs and your funerals and your weddings this last year and a half and still want to mask your kids up all day long wherever they go. Absurd. Our friend Josh Hammers here wrote a great article about the left's hypocrisy, which just knows no bounds. Mr. Hammer, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, Mike. Always good to be with you.
Yeah, man, good to talk to you. Where do we even begin? You know what I mean? It's every day. It's every day. Let's roll a couple off here first. And then I got some bigger picture stuff because it's more than they don't care. It's almost like this is a feature of what they do, not a bug. But anyway, give us some of your examples of hypocrisy first.
Yeah, we could go back as far as kind of the immediate aftermath of, George Floyd's killing in Minneapolis and kind of the beginning of the 1619 riots all across America, right? I mean, as far back as then, we're talking almost a year and a half ago at this point. People were told to social distance and they had to wear masks outside, these draconian church synagogue capacity limits in New York and California and all across blue state America. But at the same time, do you remember there was a list of hundreds of public health experts that said that the imperative to go out to fight for racial justice in the aftermath of what happened to Mr. Floyd is a magical dispensation from all the social distancing rules, right? Do you remember that letter? People have forgotten about that because it was so long ago. But look, as far as the recent events that have kind of just brought this to a whole nother level here, where to begin with the Andrew Cuomo stuff, right? I understand he's having a press conference as you and I are speaking. I guess we'll see what happens. I think he has more than enough chutzpah to not resign, but we'll see how that plays out. But there was a tweet that was uncovered from 2013 where Andrew Cuomo is basically saying, we have a moral obligation, we have a duty to believe women when they come forward with sexual assault allegations. And obviously, look, we do have a duty, of course, to let the due process system play out, to hear everyone on both sides. The problem is that over the past 5-6 years, in the aftermath of the Me Too movement, the rhetoric of people like Andrew Cuomo during kind of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation saga has gotten to the point where, hashtag believe all women has come to replace traditional norms of due process as both a legal and kind of civilizational matter here. So when you have Andrew Cuomo now saying, oh, I didn't do this, but 2-3 years ago when Brett Kavanaugh was going through the gauntlet on national television, he was, saying get rid of Kavanaugh, get rid of Kavanaugh. And then you have Joe Biden over there. Does anyone remember Tara Reid, by the way? Tara Reid just last year came forward with allegations that when she worked for that then Senator Joe Biden in 1993 that he sexually molested or groped. I can't remember the exact allegations against her. And now Joe Biden has a chutzpah to tell Andrew Cuomo to resign. What is going on here? It's crazy.
Yeah. And we don't have time to play it here, but we have the clip of Cori Bush, the congresswoman who wants to defund the police, trying to justify the fact that she has private security herself and all the rest. So it's just nonstop. And I think for a lot of people, it's demoralizing right? A lot of conservatives, it's beyond frustrating because like, geez, how do they keep getting, and listen, hypocrisy on the right as well, surely, but not so institutional and not with no repercussions ever for what they're doing. And obviously they have the power as well. So what do we do? And how should a conservative react to this just hypocrisy that really, really affects us too?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great question, Mike. I mean, the difference here, I mean, look, plenty of Republicans are hypocritical, of course. I mean, like, obviously, many people on our side have those flaws as well. But the key difference here is that the Democrats have the media on their side. Okay. Now, I'm a media guy. I run the opinion section of Newsweek. We're a bit of an exception here. We are committed to airing the full spectrum of viewpoints, of course. But the overwhelming majority of the mainstream media, whether it's on TV, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, wherever you look, they're going to go out on a limb to make apologies for the Democrats whenever they do this. So it very much is obviously kind of an institutionalized double standard in place pretty much no matter where you look. As far as like what nuts and bolts like on the ground we can actually do about that, I don't pretend to have all the answers. Look, I do think that there are obviously there's a lot of merit to like high trafficked conservative media outlets that are willing to shine a spotlight on this sort of stuff. I used to work at the Daily Wire before I worked in Newsweek. The Daily Wire, among many other websites, obviously does a lot of great work on this frontier. But look, I think that the American people overall are not fans of hypocrites. There's kind of like a guttural, kind of visceral American spirit really going back hundreds of years that always kind of values integrity, straightforwardness. I mean, Americans don't like double talk in general, right? I mean, that was kind of the whole reason that Donald Trump was elected in 2016 was they were just fed up with the kind of this ridiculous, hypocritical, sanctimonious double talking politicians. They elected the quintessential outsider. So I just think the more that we can kind of just get this message out there, whether it's via kind of mainstream media diamonds in the rough, like Newsweek, or kind of alternative media outlets, the more we get this message out there, I do think that it will begin to resonate with more and more voters as we head towards 2022.
I bounce back and forth between exactly what you articulately perfectly said, and it's still true. We must show hypocrisy every time. But I think it was Michael Malice, I forget who said it. They're like, oh, if only we can show their hypocrisy for the 658,000th time, then they'll care or something, right? So I go back and forth, right, between those two perhaps extremes, which I guess leads to the question: do they care? Do the hypocrites care that they're being hypocritical? Like, does Barack Obama care that he had this big giant wedding or party, for instance, among many other hypocrisies we could choose?
So I don't think that Democrats, liberals, leftists at that level care about their own hypocrisy. I don't think Barack Obama cares that he had this massive blowout party in Martha's Vineyard, which could end up being a COVID super spreader. I don't think John Kerry particularly cares that he private jet setted probably to that very party, while he's jet setting while talking about climate change and carbon reduction, all that out of the other side of his mouth. So I don't think Cuomo, Biden, none of these people who by their words and deeds are kind of going in total opposite directions, I don't think they have the self-awareness or the ability, frankly, to be shamed to actually care. But I do think that the median American voter, especially in a lot of these kind of purple states across the country, right? I mean, I do think the median voter probably in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Florida, look, the American people they're sick of being like lied to, okay? They're sick of this kind of two-tiered system of justice, these two-tiered system of kind of legal, basic civilizational norms whereby one set of rules apply to the ruling class and kind of the democratic, leftist, professional, managerial establishment, and another set of rules applies to the proverbial deplorables in heartland America. So I think that there are enough voters that truly do care about this. But yeah, I mean, look, Andrew Cuomo, Barack Obama, they don't have enough self-awareness to care about this. That's for sure.
Josh Hammer, opinion editor at Newsweek and a fellow at the Burke Foundation as well. Josh, always good to talk to you, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Mike.
And it's always worth pointing out the hypocrisies, and we always will. And then need to hold ourselves to a high standard as well to prevent ourselves from being attacked for what we're criticizing them for doing, of course. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, for a little perspective, in 1964, 1/3 of employees were in a union, and today it's less than 1 in 10, it's less than 10%. But that number's upticking a little bit. Numbers may be down, but their power, I'd say, is as strong as ever. Here's the teachers union leader talking about schools.
Vaccines are the single most important way of dealing with COVID. We've always dealt with, or since 1850, we've dealt with vaccines in schools. It's not a new thing to have immunizations in schools. And I think that on a personal matter, as a matter of personal conscience, I think that we need to be working with our employers, not opposing them, on vaccine mandates.
That union boss has as much power as any single person in the entire country. It's absolutely outrageous. Max Nelson is here. He's from the Freedom Foundation. He's the labor policy director. Max, how are you, brother?
I'm doing very well, Mike. Thanks for having me on your program.
Yeah, good to talk to you. So let's talk generally. How would you assess the power, membership down, but how would you assess the power and influence that unions have?
Well, I think there's an important distinction to be made, Mike, between union membership and power in the private sector versus union membership and power in the public sector and in the government workforce. You mentioned that overall union membership was at about 10% of the workforce. And that's true. That's true if you include both the public sector and the private sector. But union membership in the private sector is actually down to like 6% now, historic lows. But union membership in government, particularly in left of center states, can be as high as 40, 50, 60% of the workforce. So what we've seen is not so much, what we've seen is a big shift in the center of gravity in the labor movement from private industry to government. And the government unions that represent teachers and state workers and city, county, municipal workers, those tend to be very politically active. So their power doesn't derive from the same source that the private sector unions used to, their ability to influence the economy and engage in strikes and bring employers to the bargaining table. The power of the labor movement now, centered in government unions, is political. And so we've seen the modern labor movement become very entwined with Democratic Party politics, and that is the source that they view as necessary for them to secure their power and influence.
Very, very well said. Love the nuance. And a conflict of interest, no? Because it's the taxpayers' money, right? Like that makes it very tricky.
It does. It absolutely does. And there's a couple different things that are important to keep in mind about the differences between government unions and private sector. In government, and the unions know this and they brag about it, they get to elect. Unions can elect the person that they sit down at the bargaining table with. If it's a school board, if it's a teachers union at the school district level, they will play very heavily in the elections for school board because they want to be able to sit down at the negotiating table with somebody that they helped elect and who is beholden to them, the union, and their interests, and not the interests of students, of families, or of taxpayers. And that dynamic plays out anywhere you find unions in government, at the federal level, at the state level, down to the municipal level. And so, yes, you have this very troubling dynamic where a private special interest group gets to control in large extent the levers of government. Things like whether our schools will reopen or not are being influenced not by science or policy, but by a special interest group that has captured in many states and many school districts and cities and so on, has captured the levers of government.
I hate only have a minute and 20 seconds here. I see stories from time to time of left-leaning companies or entities that the people try to unionize and then the entities try to stop the union and the hypocrisy there. What's up with the DNC wanting to unionize? What's that story?
Well, the employees at the Democratic National Committee are forming a union right now with the SEIU, one of the most progressive and politically leftist labor unions in the country. And, I'll tell you, it couldn't happen to a better bunch of people. That you mentioned, you're absolutely right. There's been a movement in recent years for progressive nonprofits and higher education, and a lot of these left of center bastions among their employees to unionize. And, their argument is pretty straightforward. It's hard to argue with. Walk the walk. You're out there advocating for unions in your policy platform. Let us unionize. Let your employees unionize. So, if that's a platform they want to run on, then they should let their employees unionize and deal with the consequences.
Are they going to fight it, though? Do you think?
It's hard to say. There's been some conflicting press reports about that. The public face from the DNC and SEIU is that everything is all rainbows and unicorns and happy. But some reporting behind the scenes has suggested that there is actually some foot dragging at the DNC. I mean, of any group out there, they're aware of the political optics of opposing unionization while trying to impose it on the rest of the world. So I think they have to be careful about their perception. But I'm sure they have reservations.
A perfect follow-up to our segment we just did about hypocrisy. Max Nelson, Freedom Foundation. Thanks, Max. Appreciate you, man.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Guys, please go back to our first segment about did my anti-mask presentation. Please share that far and wide. Spread the word.